And welcome to the Thursday, March 5th, 2020 school committee meeting. It is 7:01. I am calling this meeting to order. Members, Amy Morton, Cynthia Listevnik, Dawn Naborski, Joan Shaughnessy, Stacy Raffi are present. Anne Louise should be on her way, and Lisa Koshin may be delayed if coming at all due to something that came up at home. So good evening and welcome. We are actually going to hold the meeting minutes from February 27th because that was just last week, so we didn't allow for sufficient time for people to review them, so we'll review them for next meeting. Public comment. Students, you're up.
Okay. Well, the Theater 370's production of Free Below that competed last weekend in Glowfest, they sadly did not move on to the next round of competition, but I was talking to some of the members of Theater 370 and they reviewed the judges' notes and they seemed to all be really happy with how they did and they had good notes, so that was great for them, and they're already beginning work on their next production, which is their spring production, and that's going to be Much Ado About Nothing, like it's Shakespeare, so they're looking forward to that. And spring sports registration closes tomorrow, and spring sports will begin a week from Monday on the 16th? On the 16th, yes. So,
Wow. Your spring sports, oh my goodness.
And so this past weekend, the robotics team placed first at the first robotics.
Yeah, nice.
And the senior showcase will be Wednesday, March 11th at 7 at the HHS auditorium. Mary and I just came from rehearsal for the group dance, and tickets are going to be $10 at the door. And then also over the past few days, there's been groups of 8th graders coming out to tour the high school.
Oh, yeah. So they're touring and you're touring other schools. The circle of life, huh? All right. Thank you. Andy?
Remember to wash your hands, please, and thank you.
Cynthia?
I think we're good.
Joan?
Last night, for the first time in a long time, the two executive boards and one advisory board met all together. The select board, the finance committee, and the school committee met all together now. And what we hope to be the first of many meetings. And the purpose of these joint meetings is to increase communication, collaboration, and to really start working as a team for the town more than we have in an informal way. So I'll let Stacy get into the details. One of the very salient things that came from that meeting is a collective desire to develop a vision statement or a strategic plan for the town, to which all our priorities will be anchored. We haven't worked out the details of what that's going to look like. We're talking about a cross-sectional vision working group. It cannot be a committee because otherwise the FinCom, no members from the FinCom can be on it. So it will be a working committee, cross-sectional across the community. And so more details on that to come. And we are going to meet again before town meeting in the spring.
Thank you.
And the robotics club won.
Dawn?
On Tuesday, March 3rd, over at Miller and Placentino, we had math night. We had the raffle baskets, a yearly fundraiser, and the book fair was this week over at Miller. So thank you for everyone for organizing that and for all of the teachers and students that came in to run math night. The Rams spring musical, Shrek, is coming up. It's about a month away, less than a month away now, April 3rd, April 4th, and April 5th.
Great, thank you. I too would like to thank the select board and the FinCom and the rest of the entire school committee was present last night for our conversation. So
All of us.
I actually didn't intend to talk about it tonight, so I don't really have a lot of details other than we need to move forward and keep pushing for a plan that the entire town uses as an anchor in our planning for budgets and not just budgets, but what we want the town to look like So I'm excited about that. And I want to thank HCAT for recording that as well. It was an unplanned meeting, if you will. You know, it wasn't weeks in advance, so they really came together quickly, so I really want to thank them. I'm a huge fan of them. I want to congratulate the Destination Imagination teams. They competed in the regionals this past weekend. Holliston represented really, really impressively with over 25 teams. I don't have the numbers of how many moved to states, and I couldn't even keep up as they were going through the awards, but many of our teams are moving on to states. If you've never seen a DI presentation, I highly recommend it. It's really interesting what the kids can do. So congratulations to all of them. And I think that would be it.
So I just have one update I wanted to provide the committee and the community, and I'd like to, first of all, acknowledge Fire Chief Mike Cassidy for being here tonight to support me in this effort and to be the partner that he is. I wanted to give the committee and the community a brief update on the coronavirus issue. This week, I've met with the Health Director, Scott Moles, Emergency Preparedness Director, Fire Chief Mike Cassidy, and Town Administrator Jeff Ritter down at Town Hall. We reviewed the various pieces of input we're getting from the groups and governmental agencies at the state and federal level that support us to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. We continue to brainstorm plans and options and contingencies and basically did some what-if planning that we'll continue to do, and we've agreed to meet weekly for the foreseeable future until that no longer becomes necessary. And again, while there can always be there may, in some cases, be challenges at a political level in a community. I can assure you that at the department head level, the cooperation between and among departments in Holliston is 100%. I've never worked in a community where the connections between school and town side government work so efficiently and effectively. And we pick up the phone and talk to each other, and we meet and we coordinate and we plan and we execute together, and we make joint decisions together, and it is something that I think is important and should be comforting to this community because it is not always the case, and it's something of which Holliston should be very proud. Continuing my Corona update, the governor, as you may be aware, has canceled out-of-country trips through May 1st. That has no impact on Holliston. We do have a trip to Montreal that is school-sponsored that's scheduled for late June. We are currently reviewing the details of our trip insurance for that trip and to determine a date by which we may have to make some local decisions. So we want to make sure we have that information so that we can obviously wait as long as possible to make decisions with the most information as possible. Since it's June, we have a little bit of time, assuming the trip insurance offers that flexibility. I just want to, while this is, and I want to emphasize this very, very strongly, while this is a non-school sponsored event, there is a non-school sponsored trip to DC that many of our 8th graders go on. And we are reaching out to the organizers, checking in to determine their current thinking, sharing with them the information we have from the CDC and with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, none of which right now recommend against domestic travel of large or small groups, but and kind of going to make connections with them so that they are aware. We do get maybe not daily updates, but every other day updates, and the situation is very fluid. And we're also going to be recommending to them that they check their trip insurance if they include it as part of their package, so they're aware of dates by which they have to make a decision. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health yesterday issued or modified a previous advisory, and they are now asking people who traveled from the the 4 countries that the CDC has designated as level 3 countries: China, Iran, South Korea, and Italy. They're asking people who traveled from these areas to voluntarily self-quarantine for 14 days, counting from the day they return to the United States. We have advised all families who we are aware meet those criteria, and all of those have agreed to follow the DPH advisory. This happened, actually, we got the advisory about 4 o'clock last night, and through the hard work of Lynn Bowler and the principals, we were able to have contacted all families by 8 o'clock last night, and gave them this information, and they have agreed to follow the DPH advisory. I am scheduled to participate in a conference call tomorrow, early afternoon, with the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, the Commissioner of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and superintendents across the state to begin to do some school-specific discussions around information that we need that we're frankly lacking a little bit, and some issues around supplies that we're lacking, specifically seeing if we can get some help around things like hand sanitizer, which are becoming very difficult to come by. And then it's currently my plan, based on if I can get this out before our 2 o'clock meeting tomorrow, to send out basically this information in email format to all parents and staff members within now would be a 10-day, an update based on the one I provided 10 days ago. So that's the latest. It is up to date as of 6 o'clock tonight when I wrote these notes. It may have changed already. It's a very, very fluid situation. And we continue to emphasize the basics: wash, cough etiquette. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. I have asked each, the school nurses at Miller and Placentino, and actually I've asked the school principals to arrange to have the school nurses in each school go into every classroom at Miller and Placentino and conduct a 10-minute mini lesson on hand washing and cough and sneeze etiquette for each classroom, to make sure that they're getting that instruction from the nurse in this time, just to make sure we're doing that. So
I think our friends at the middle school might benefit.
Yeah,
Just saying.
So that's my report. Thank you.
I will be demonstrating cough etiquette.
Building on Ms. DeVoe-Howell's comments about the 8th graders, yeah, there was some great energy up here at the high school when the 8th graders visited in 3 waves. It started with counselors meeting with them around course selection. Then they did a tour with a great group of high school students who took them around and really gave them a personalized tour of the school. They then participated in lunch and then attended the last block class. So that programming has kind of over the years evolved. Or, you know, when I first came here, it was pretty simple, and now it's kind of much more multifaceted and gives 8th graders a much greater opportunity to get a feel for the school and get, you know, meet some of the high school students and have some friendly faces when they arrive next year. A lot going on last weekend, obviously, with First Robotics and Destination Imagination. We also had an academic decathlon team participate at MIT and finished 15th.
Oh, wow.
We had 6 students that were part of that. And yeah, so they really made us proud. And then several students finished any place from 4th or 5th in various categories. So they really worked hard and represented the district well. And lastly, I had the opportunity to meet with Barbara Ryan and Jennifer Prince from Mindshare, which is the parent education wing of the PTO, and they're looking to focus their efforts over the next several years around parent education, around wellness. So it very much dovetailed with the work that we're doing in the district in the presentation last week through with Erin Squires and Sarah Bennis, and they are just it was clear that the partnership was going to be really strong. They're wanting to partner with all different organizations throughout the community as well as the schools, and they bring just a lot of knowledge, but also an openness, and so we'll be working closely with them over the next months and years. So it was a good meeting.
Great, thank you. Eloise, did you have anything?
We talked about the charging thing.
I assumed that. No, only to say I'm really glad that we did that. Thank you for helping to organize it, Stacy. And then I just wanted to give my shout out. I know you mentioned the robotics team, and I was so delighted when I heard that news. It just made me jump for joy. Those kids have worked so hard, and it was such an enormous milestone. And they did it on their own, which is key. So that was that. And then the third thing is that I just wanted to reiterate that we are having the fundraiser for the class of 2020, and the Police K-9 organization Friends of Police K-9 has volunteered to kind of step up and help sponsor the event. So we're really hoping for both groups it'll be a success. It's next Thursday at 7 p.m. at Christ the King Church, and you can get tickets online, but you can find posters about it out and around town, Coffee Haven, etc. So, thank you.
Good. It is time for public comment. We do have a request from Mrs. Taylor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So while they did not win at the MUTG Awards, Ellie Grosjean did win the award. Ellie Grosjean is a senior here, and she won an award for an original composition, original song that she wrote. So that was really exciting. And you know what? She used the Music Lab to help create that. So yay. So think about that when I ask all of you out there. There are Mrs. Fields Cookies and Tasty Treats fundraiser, March 13th. Find your favorite HMA student, music student, and we can buy cookies and cheesecake and all sorts of other wonderfully delicious things. All of our fundraisers go directly back to the students and the teachers for things like the Music Lab, for the equipment that Ellie was able to use. So our goal, as you know, is to help students find their passion and share their passions. So yes. And yes, I'm very excited about robotics.
That's great.
So thank you for all your support. Thank you, all of you, Brad, for helping all your support, because it meant a lot to those students. That's how they got there. So thank you.
Good. Congratulations. Thank you.
I hope your son goes into marketing.
He can be relentless.
He is.
But it's interesting. I said this to both my kids when they were in robotics. Before they began the competition, they already won. Because this team, and as many other teams in robotics, FIRST Robotics, are very self-managed. Some of the teams aren't. Some of the teams have more mentors than we have students. Some of the teams, the students don't get to touch the robot. In this particular event, Ryan looked over at one of the other teams, and there was one student in the pit, and the rest were mentors. I said, well, maybe the team's really small. The team is 4 times the size of Holliston's. But you know what he said? But they didn't get to learn how to do it. What's interesting about here in Holliston, the mentors do help teach the students. The students then teach the students. Year after year after year, many years in our case. And they're able to do everything from public relations, fundraising, recruitment of advisors, as well as other students, as well as computer engineering, computer science, mechanical engineering, structural engineering. I don't think chemicals are involved. I haven't seen any chemicals. I'm hoping there's no chemical engineering involved. but they get to do it all, and they get to have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, oh, that's
So,
great. Great
it's-
program.
Yeah, and it's year-round for them.
Right.
The last 6 weeks, not, it's round the clock, but they've been doing training all year long. So it is exciting, and I hope that other families that might be listening to this and they have their children coming up, it really is an exciting opportunity for students to really learn a lot about themselves and have a lot of fun. It was all about the food, too. We always make time for food. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
So I don't believe there was anyone else who wanted to speak. So I'm going to close public comment. I need to go back to Keith Boudet. My apologies.
I just wanted to announce, there's probably only a couple people in town, I would guess, who know this name. Michael's one of them, but the passing of former Superintendent Jack Drinkwater. Jack brought school choice here and to Holliston, which is obviously a big part of us. And I received notification just a short time ago about it. And yes, services are Saturday. I'm up in Alton, New Hampshire. Jack loved being up in New Hampshire. Once he left Holliston, he went to New Hampshire, and I don't know if he's ever been south of the border since. So, but Jack brought a lot to this district at the time. He was a transition basically from Sam to where we are today. So, so I just wanted to announce that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I've added one thing to the agenda under personnel. Dr. Jackson's going to give us an update. So,
Yes, I wanted to give you an update on, speaking of sad news, I wanted to give you an update, although not equivalent, but still a little sad. An update on the search process for a new Director of Student Services. If you could just distribute those that way and that way. I have a brief, actually, can I have one of those? Thank you. Brief 4-slide presentation. Keith, can you turn that on if you get a minute? As I informed the committee earlier this week, our Student Services Director, Meg Camiri, has accepted a position in the North Attleboro Public Schools, which is the school district in which she grew up, and actually first worked in central office as a high school student and as a college student during the summers. Her mom was a teacher in North Attleboro High School, and the current superintendent was her mom's principal at North Attleboro High School. So there's a big connection that Meg has to North Attleboro that I think she shared in her letter of resignation. I am heartbroken to see her leave, both on a personal and a professional level. But for her, I'm very excited for the opportunity that this presents to her. And I am glad that she's going to be here through June 30th, and I'm confident that we'll have an effective transition to the person who will be occupying her office next. So for senior leadership positions, we'll be following the same process that we have followed in the past, that's also outlined in school committee policy. I am going to be convening a search and a screening committee. Their responsibilities are to paper screen all the candidates, to select and interview semifinalists. Those interviews, that conversation and that selection and those interviews do not take place in public session. So all this work of the screening committee is done in non-public session, is not open to the public. And the task I give them is simple. Their job is to select. Of all the people who applied, their job is to select 3 to 5 finalists. I will accept no less than 3, and I will accept no more than 5, and they cannot be in rank order. They have to just be 3 to 5 names. And then they, as individuals, they can then consult with me prior to the selection that I make of the successful candidate. So that's essentially the tasks of the screening committee. The screening committee that I'm planning on having, I've asked Peter in his position as assistant superintendent to co-chair this, along with Nicole Bottomley, who does have a lot of experience. She actually co-chaired the committee that resulted in the hiring of Peter as the assistant superintendent. I'm also going to be having one more building-based administrator, whether it be assistant principal, and a student services administrator. And Ms. Kamiri does have an administrative assistant at central office with whom she works very closely, and we want to give her a voice in this process. Per your policy and per our practice, long-time practice, I'm inviting 2 members of the school committee to serve on this screening committee. We're going to be offering slots to 3 teachers / and I'm using the word service provider to be school psychologists or a PT or an OT or something like that, a paraprofessional, and then 2 to 3 parents. And that number is actually a little more flexible than the others. Sometimes you get a lot of parent interest and other times less so. If we're able to get a higher level of interest and we can accommodate more than 2 or 3, then I've asked Peter to please do his best to do that. In terms of the search timeline, Peter and I have kind of sketched this out together, and the position is going to be posted tomorrow on School Spring, and which is essentially the only place where school openings are posted these days, and it will also be posted internally per the requirements of various collective bargaining agreements. We're going to be setting a deadline for applications of March 27th. On April 7th, Peter will have already convened this screening committee. They will have completed between March 27th and April 7th. They will have done their individual paper screening, and then Peter will have scheduled a meeting where that screening committee will get together and select the semifinalists. There's no limit on the number of semifinalists they can select, and as many as they want to interview. Those interviews are tentatively scheduled between April 8th and April 17th so that we can get them done before April school vacation, and then the screening committee on or before April 17th will select the 3 to 5 finalists. Following return from April vacation, that first week back, I'll be conducting personal one-on-one interviews with the 3 to 5 finalists that are forwarded to me, and then we will be inviting finalists to Holliston for a site visit. Those site visits traditionally are like noon to 5 o'clock type things where the candidate spends the first 3 hours in our schools. From 3 to 4, we have an open house, typically here in the high school library, for staff to come and meet with the finalists, and then from 4 to 5, an open house for parents to meet with finalists. Then I paused the process for a week to allow anybody, staff, that should actually say deadline for staff and public input to the superintendent. That's the opportunity for people to provide me with their advice as to the candidate they would favor and why. And then on May 22nd, which is a school committee meeting date, I plan to bring forward a candidate to you for approval. This position requires the approval of the school committee for hire. those positions, the positions that you hire the superintendent, you approve the hire of the assistant superintendent, the special education director, which this person is, and the business manager. By law, my responsibility is to bring a candidate forward to you where you weigh in with a yes or a no vote. And that's the process we're planning on following. Our goal, as I said, is to have the search completed by May 22nd, and the selected candidate hopefully starting in July to dovetail with Ms. Kamiri's departure on June 30th.
Any questions about the process? So as we mentioned to you via email that we'd like to have 2 people on the committee, and if you had interest to let us know. And 2 people sent me a message, and they happen to be the 2 people that I thought of for the screening committee. But before I share that, does anyone have any thoughts? Do they want to? No, we're good? Okay, so I thought the minute I saw this, I thought Cynthia because of her background in social work, and I thought of Lisa, she's the liaison to CPAC, and she's also on the wellness committee, and they do a lot of work with this particular, she does a lot of work with this particular position. So if there aren't any questions, comments, objections, I would like to list Cynthia and Lisa as our school committee reps. Do we have to vote on it? Okay, good. We're good? Great. Thank you. And thank you for that.
Thanks,
Good night,
ladies.
ladies.
Good night, ladies.
Okay.
Good night, ladies.
And back to Dr. Jackson again. Do you have an update
Yes,
on school start
I
times?
have 2 brief updates on the school start times work that we're doing. The first is I did want to mention that the YMCA has communicated with me that they have received adequate interest and will be running a program in Holliston next year for Miller and Placentino families. That information is going to be made available through, at a minimum, through Backpack Express to families. They have asked me to email that information to all families, but that is not our practice, to email sign-up information for programs other than those connected to the Holliston Public Schools. There are other programs in town as well as the Y, so I do try to treat all of the local providers equally and not favor one over the other with access to our email distribution list. So we'll be posting their information at their request on our Backpack Express, which I suspect many Miller and Placentino families subscribe to, and they'll get that information that way. I also wanted to provide the committee a brief update on the impact study information. I wanted to follow up on the feedback that you provided me at the last meeting, which seems like it was a year ago or an hour ago. I'm not really sure, but it was just a week ago. Basically, some of the feedback I received from the committee was to consider adding questions to ask Placentino parents about sleep. The changes that you see, the things you see in red are changes since this was originally presented to you last week. So as you can see under sleep habits, I am adding the parent survey for Placentino sleep habits. There were some questions about the youth risk behavior surveys and the timing of the baseline data. I gave that a lot of thought, and before I made a decision, my first decision was if I switched to asking those questions through a Google form or a SurveyMonkey or whatever for the baseline testing, that I would have to do the same thing for the impact study testing, because the Youth Risk Behavior Survey does have an algorithm built into it where they do scan for outlier data. So in other words, if a student says they do everything all the time, there's a well-developed algorithm that's included in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that scans those out. So we can't use one, even if we're asking the same questions, because one would apply the algorithm to screen answers and one would not. We can't compare. Those are not comparable data sets. So my first decision was, if I don't go with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey as baseline, then I can't go with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey as the impact study. So, but I was still convinced that the right thing to do was, because the data is dated, the baseline data is dated, A, and B, because we were going to be getting the impact study data late, that I did make the switch, and we are going to ask those questions through the online survey that we give to our high school and middle school students. The same questions, but we're going to be administering themselves as opposed to using the pre-existing Youth Risk Behavior Survey questions. I'm still studying the issue about impact on activities. I really am struggling on how to capture that data, how to ask that question, and I'm looking for other ideas. I'm still I'm scanning some of the work that Dr. Owens has provided us, and I haven't seen anything to date that I think is reliable. So, or actually, other than using another methodology like interviews and I'm trying to think, what do you call those small groups that you do?
Focus groups.
Focus groups. And that's kind of an extension of this methodology that I just don't feel we have the capacity to take on. I did consider the suggestion to consider mood check data for the depression piece, and I've decided against that. I think the data was collected in good faith with an understanding from parents as to how it would be used, and I think to change that is just not appropriate. So I didn't even call the mood check people and ask them if it was okay. I just felt it would be disingenuous to even to do that. I also took this information. I have been in communication with a number of interested community members, parents primarily, actually parents all, who had been corresponding with me through email during the course of the conversations about the change in school start times, and some of whom had been strong advocates for the impact study. I shared Friday morning, I sent them all an individual email with this information that I shared with the committee, and I specifically solicited their feedback on my plan and asked them to provide me with feedback by tomorrow. So I'll be assimilating that information following the deadline. But right now, barring any changes through that process, and there's one other process that still is ongoing. We this week we had a really I'm trying to describe this conversation. Passionate conversation at the administrative team meeting about some of the ethics of collecting anonymous data that could, if it weren't anonymous, be used as a screening tool. In other words, if we use that, some of these tools are used outside as screening tools, and if we conducted that as a screen, and it were like the mood check, would use something similar, they would, if there was a positive, they would follow up with services or contact families about concerns. We will not have that ability because we're going to be doing this completely blind. We talked a little bit about trying to assigning students random numbers, and that's getting pretty crazy. So we're still, as an administrative team, we're still struggling a little bit with that. I think we're coming down on the place where we just have to word it in such a way that we're clear that this is not a screening tool, that this is not diagnostic in any way and won't be used for that purposes. It's used exclusively to measure the level, and I'm going to probably use, for Miller parents, use some less clinical words like measure the level of sadness and measure the level of worry, as opposed to use more clinical terms, which could imply diagnostic, its use as a diagnostic tool. And we're also, I'm going to be talking to guidance perhaps about, or Dave Keim is going to be talking to guidance, perhaps about at least doing a general guidance drop-in after they do the survey. If there's anything about the survey that made you want to talk to guidance, or made you a little nervous and want to talk to somebody about it, this is how you do it. Just in case something, a student who fills this out goes, that's kind of weird. I didn't realize this pattern or something. So we're still struggling that a mite, but right now, I think we're settling on the maintaining anonymity completely and being very crystal clear, both in our permissions that we'll be seeking with families, from families, and that it's not a screening tool.
Yeah. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey, though, is not either, and it asks very similar.
It asks the same questions.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. And that was part of our conversation.
Yeah, okay.
But one of the tools that is being used is a diagnostic tool.
Right.
Both the Spence Children's Anxiety Scale and the Mood and Feelings Questionnaire is used by professionals as a diagnostic or screening tool. And the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is never used in that context. So,
But isn't the difference too that you're just using a small subsection of it? You're not implementing you're not
I am
using
using a
whole text.
subset of the Spence, but I am using the whole Mood and Feelings Questionnaire.
Okay.
There are 13 questions on the Mood and Feelings Questionnaire.
Got
I'm
it.
using all 13. And that's a good point. I could take a look and maybe, yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at them and see if
Just
there's
look
some
at those
that are-
13 again.
And we're also, I'm also going to, they both use different scales, so I really can't move from one to the other, because some are never always, sometimes, and some are 0 to 4. So I can't, that would be too confusing to kind of intermix the two sections. So I'm just going to have to be careful. I did just want to be transparent about that, because that's, these are our professionals did provide me with some feedback that I think is important to be considered through this process. So that's where we are on that. We're still on schedule to administer hopefully administer the baseline test in the month of March, and I'll keep you updated as the month progresses.
Liza, go ahead. I just wanted to offer, a cautionary observation with all of this. I think it's phenomenal that we're kind of putting the college try into trying to get a baseline, A, and then B, understand the impact of this change in start times across the board. But this is going to be directional at best because we're looking at a multitude of data sets, many of which are qualitative, and we're not looking at them over a point in time on the same cohort of students. And therefore, it really makes it challenging to draw conclusions about whether or not a particular group of students are really benefiting or not benefiting from the change. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think we should still be doing this. Don't misunderstand me. And I applaud you for doing it. I just want to make sure that everybody who's watching isn't setting their expectations inappropriately for a big finding one way or the other. Because I'm not confident that we're going to be able to get to that finding or that that finding is necessarily reliable. And
Yeah.
that isn't to undermine anything
No,
we're doing,
and-
but I'm really concerned that whatever side of the equation on this topic you fall, that people will stake a lot of importance on this that may be undue importance, if you will.
I agree, and
Is that
I think
the
it's
way to say
important
it?
that you repeated that this week, because I made that point last week. This is, first of all, this is at best going to show correlation, not causation, because this is not a controlled study. There are multiple variables at work that impact all of these things. The economy, if the economy goes down, worry could go, anxiety could go up. There's all sorts of things that
Well,
could.
it's just the point in
You
time
can't
in
just
the
say-
course of the year when you ask
Well,
students things.
we're
or
trying to
whatever.
control for that by asking at the same time, but, so we are trying to control as many variables as possible, but this is not going to be, this is not going to prove anything. It's going to provide data that will provide us with an indication.
We may be able to tease out insights or trends or
Right. Well, trends will
possible.
require more than
Yeah.
2 years.
Well, but that's the point, is that it would have to be done over time and even across the course of a school year. I mean, I don't know how you would do that without, an exhaustive amount of effort and too much survey impact, survey fatigue on students, et cetera. But that's really the challenge here, is that
Well,
it's
Dr.
gonna be
Owens would be happy to do her $500,000
I know,
Yes.
study
yes,
that
she would,
did
I'm
in
sure.
Virginia for that.
Well, that was
So,
a huge
That was a huge
to be
district,
fair,
but,
hundreds
I mean,
of
they
thousands.
they're doing multivariable studies. It's,
Yeah.
this is what it is. And it's better, I
We should do it. We should
started
do
this
it,
out,
but-
and I mean this, and I say it proudly. I think this is the highest quality impact study that a school district in Massachusetts is conducting on school start times. I have
If at all.
surveyed and
Many are not,
looked.
have not known at all.
I have looked and I've talked to superintendents. You know, my network of superintendents is pretty strong. I have talked to everybody I can talk to, and nobody has ever done a survey of this level. So whatever it is, this is the best there is in Massachusetts right now.
And Louise, thank you for that
Thank you,
point, because I
Louise.
was doing some stuff along those lines. Brad, back to you again.
So-
An opportunity.
So very briefly, this is the second of 3 meetings where we discussed the requirements for the superintendent to report to the Department of Education, the intent on how the additional $30 per student of Chapter 78 is going to be spent in the town of Holliston. I reported to the committee last week that first of all, that those funds are currently estimated to be $81,180, and they are kind of cooked into the 1% or run rate budget that were, the 1% guideline and the run rate budget that the school committee is considering tonight. Specifically, I'm proposing that we indicate to the department that Holliston will use its additional Chapter 78 to support the implementation of our new K-5 ELA curriculum in FY '21. The purpose of this meeting is to offer the community, the school committee and the community an opportunity to weigh in on this recommendation prior to the school committee vote, which will take place on March 19th, to approve this plan. As I said to you earlier, some of this is, we're kind of fitting a square process into a zero hole because we're not really getting anything, but this is nonetheless the legislation. So if the committee has any feedback or if the public has any feedback, I would ask the chair if she would offer both the opportunity to provide that now.
Yes, so, and also we have a member in the audience who's here actually observing, and I actually wanted to share this with you because it's just interesting. It's about the Student Opportunity Act, so you may find this helpful, so I'm going to pass this down to you. So
Read it and give us a 4-page paper.
I'm just going to bypass you altogether.
So this side of the table, any feedback? Any? This side of the table?
No.
I think you made the right choice, honestly, and I don't mean that to be simplistic. I think this makes sense, and I think that's good.
Could you, for the record, offer
yes.
the public the opportunity to weigh in on this?
Is there anyone from the public who has some comments or questions about Dr. Jackson's proposal? Great. I'm going to close that section.
Thank you. Lisa, if you
do we
could
need
make
to
sure the
vote this?
minutes reflect that she asked that. You will vote on this at your next
Okay.
meeting. That's the process Desi's put together. Thank you for your
Thank you.
indulgence.
Okay. I want to take a 30-second stretch for a minute because Brad has been talking for a little bit. I just want everyone to take a couple seconds. No, as you should, but we're going to have a big budget discussion, so take 30 seconds to have a little refresher.
To open a window?
And open a window because it is hotter than Hades in here.
Why is it so hot?
Wedding a fever.
I was worried about that. Let me just say something. I was worried. What's going on? We usually are freezing.
Are we going to put the budget subcommittee recommendation up on the screen? Do we want to do that?
I think.
Can we do that?
I think we should for two reasons.
I don't have a
One,
dongle, so
I set up a
you.
column that we can. Wait, who had the dongle last week?
Dan,
Dan had it.
what? Just going down?
No, that wasn't.
Oh, I forgot to say that I saw the donation being unboxed today and set up. A Chromebook set up.
Oh, how wonderful.
Louise.
Hang on, let me just.
Oh, maybe I should put that in the news.
Sure. They were unboxing them. They're little white
Do you have a dongle?
Chromebooky tablet things. Dan and Mary Matt
Down there.
were unboxing and putting them all together.
All right, I'm going to give Andy
Having
10 seconds and then we'll start.
I was supposed to be working at the library.
Well,
I was mostly
yeah, but I can,
socializing, to be honest.
yeah,
I
but you
did
have a
put
dongle
books
that's
away,
doing,
I used to be.
yeah, but do you have an HD, or do you have an HDMI port on here? No?
These don't.
No, just display port, yeah. All right.
Just have
Every time I
the.
put the book away, it was interesting.
So we might not be able to put the budget presentation up on the screen. Oh, can we?
I can pass it to Keith and use his machine. Right?
You're gonna take your stick and
No, you're gonna do it. You're gonna do it.
Where's the Purell?
You're going to be his Vanna,
Go
or
get
Vanna
it.
White, apparently.
Let me shoot this to you via email, okay?
Okay. What is it in?
It's Excel. I hate
So we are
doing
in
it
part of
Excel
the
because
budget
it's so
process where the committee, budget subcommittee presented their recommendation based on Dr. Jackson's recommendation 2 meetings ago. So this evening, the committee, our role tonight is to have a conversation about this and vote a preliminary budget that we would share with the FinCom and then continue working through the process so that we have a budget to bring forth to town meeting this year for approval by the residents. So
Doesn't gonna give me this to you.
just, we want to be able to
30
share the.
seconds, I
Yeah, no
apologize.
worries. No worries.
While we're doing this, I can talk and type.
Okay, just send it.
Just apparently can't do that. Hang on. Oh, so slow.
I should just fill that cup, so anyways, I know.
So we should have a general discussion like about Super Tuesday. We have a social studies teacher available.
Oh, yeah. Thank you all for voting. Go us.
No.
Go for
We're
it.
talking about the budget.
Okay.
People can
I didn't get
also
a sticker.
stay abreast on the budget process by checking out the district website. When you go to holliston.k12.mass.us, if you click on the left nav bar that says About, there is the budget and capital link. And there are all of the documents that we are either going through tonight or presentations, et cetera. So it's there.
Yes. All right. You know what I'm going to send you
It's just
to?
messy.
Well,
There's a lot on
You're
there.
giving me a better look.
no, wasn't very well.
Oh, my gosh.
Let me send you the.
I'm not sure everything's up there.
Oh, I've been there. I've seen the
I
desk.
don't know. It's close.
It's a lot like my desk. He has a few more piles. He's been there longer.
All right. Let me send you I just sent you the spreadsheet. Okay. Now I'm going to
Brad?
send you the PowerPoint.
Can I have this electronically? Thank you.
Did you get it?
Oops.
Do you need it tonight, Joe? I'll have to go back to my...
No. Absolutely.
So Dawn, we're actually,
In fact, I can scan
we're
it when I
going to
get
put
home.
up on the
Brad.
screen, up on our screen, on the projection screen, our presentation in just a moment. Good?
I am.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Thanks.
I'm just
Thank you
trying
for
to
that.
give you the PowerPoint document that went along with this.
Yeah, but we're not.
Well, there's, okay, so there's one, all right, we can mark off paper for this bit. If you pull the tab up that says, yeah, that, oh, wow, that's really not awful to look at.
Thank you, Lisa.
So first off, this summary chart from last week, there was one mistake on it, and I want to apologize because I was typing quickly when I added these priorities on the bottom. I did not mean to add the ESL facilitator. Brad, thank you for pointing that out. It was neither on our recommendation nor his, so I'm not quite sure. I was typing too quickly. It was supposed to be, and actually it was, I went back to my notes, Cynthia, from you, the ELL program leadership person that a couple of people, yourself included, had pointed out as a potential priority.
That's the coordinator position. That's
Yeah, so I really apologize. That's ESL, EL.
No, it was out of district coordinator.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah, it was like, no, it was the out of district coordinator, actually.
Actually, I went back to you. Really? That's what was in there. We have the, or the out of district, whatever. In either case. In either case, where we left off last week is that we had like a what was the number here? 4.73% recommended increase, which is not perhaps realistic in the current environment. It's not that is so extraordinary in the context of the things that we are asking for, but I'm not sure it's productive to move forward with that. And we did talk a lot about that in subcommittee, but felt that it was worth at least sitting down with the committee at large to go through this. So what I did do is spend a little bit of time afterwards. We didn't reconvene as a subcommittee. We could have, but I'm not sure it would have come back with anything extraordinary. We needed to have this conversation we're about to have. I took the feedback from the committee, and I did take a few minutes to try to look at a couple of different scenarios. And the way I see this, and I'm throwing this out just as a personal thought, and then all of you can weigh in, obviously, is that we have two options on the table, potentially three. One is indeed to go the route of just full-day kindergarten, in whole or in part,
Am I, oh, thank you. Sorry, Andy. Lots of wires.
depending on, what that number is. And that is a very valid argument that we might want to go ahead and pursue that. The second is to not do that and to go for all or some of the positions that we have recommended. And to Joan's point last week, it would tally up a significant incremental benefit cost because it's, over 8 FTEs when you add it all up. And we were cognizant of that when we put the list together. So that wasn't a mistake by any means. It was something we were well aware of. The in-between is a bit of a hybrid. And I want to throw this out because I think there's merit in looking at it and some important compromises here. So first off, on the right hand, I've got to get up and stand up for you guys because I can't see this myself. Over on this column, so this is what we recommended here. I know everybody at home, this is like a micro eye chart, you can't see it. But for you guys, this is what we recommended last week. And Keith, if you want to share that with everyone.
I'm just going to make it bigger so you can see it. Hold on.
So, Ann Louise, under Miller, is the full-time daily permanent sub that is not recommended?
That was not in the superintendent's
Okay.
or the
So you can
subcommittee's.
see in,
Hold on. That's too big. Hold on, give me a second.
No, I like too big. Too big's
it
good.
is good.
Because some of us can't see.
Let's try a little less big, okay? Maybe a little less big. How about that?
I didn't set a left column margin if you want to do that, I don't know. Set that, we can scroll right. And
Well, you can get into,
Pretty
you
good.
can see the numbers there.
Okay, all right, so here were Dr. Jackson's recommendations, going down to the bottom, and by and large, we replicated those. So one thing you might do is just hide that column, Keith. That may
Which one?
You could probably hide Brad's column, the superintendent column, because
Because you don't care.
with a couple of exceptions, we really stayed very true to what Dr. Jackson recommended because
Okay.
he was very thoughtful in that recommendation this year. Okay, so you can see here what the subcommittee came back with last week, which included 1/3 of the tuition-free full-day kindergarten cost, if you will, which means that we would begin to reduce tuition to zero over a 3-year plan, in addition to a number of positions that amounted to, I don't remember exactly what the FTE count was, I think it was 8 or 9. So I went back and I looked at priorities, I listened to what everyone's comments were from last week, and then tried to make some sort of thoughtful recommendations around where we might go with that. Again, recognizing we haven't sat down as a subcommittee again, but we can change these here and now. What I did is set up a column with alt, and then if we put the number in, FTEs will calculate out accordingly, and we can see it right now. If you say, no, I don't like that, let's add this back in or take that out. And if you scroll to the bottom, just a little bit farther down, you can see then what our total incremental ask is above and beyond the fixed cost increase or run rate for the year. And so then it shows what our incremental percentage is and what the total year-over-year change is. So I'll go through what I did here, but in kind of culling back the number of positions we asked for, I was able to get it down to an incremental ask of only 1.18%, and that includes tuition-free full-day kindergarten, but only 1/3 of it, for a total year-over-year change of 3.9, which is a lot more respectable, maybe negotiable than where we were. So if you go back up, I'll show you the things I pulled out. If these don't ring true, then we can talk about it. But I have the 1/3 cost because we hadn't talked about making any changes to that. If we go to the full cost, just for everyone's math head here, it's about $630,000. So that right away puts us way up. It doesn't have a benefit impact, but it changes the math dramatically, and I think it puts some other things at risk. Because the math and reading tutors at Miller were so low cost on this, it just seemed like a rounding error on all the other costs and short money for a bigger potential gain. It seemed like a reasonable thing to try to keep them in the mix. So I put them in. They don't add a lot in terms of, like, together, they add about 1 FTE impact. So there is that. And then...
Do they? I thought they were already benefits eligible as it is.
One is, one is not.
One is,
Oh,
one is not.
okay.
Yeah, so this is a little fuzzy math here.
Yeah.
If you really want to get down to it, and this would have to be more precisely done. And then down here, okay, so let me tell you what I skipped over. I skipped over the speech and language pathologist. Again, not because any of these aren't important, but in our conversations last week, they weren't coming up as, sort of the hot button issues, if you will. There's no way to say that right, but you understand what I mean. The student management assistant at the middle school, this was a tough one, and I think in Lauren's conversation, I think I only pulled back on that out of sheer cost, but I'm very sensitive to the plea that David Jordan and team made with respect to the time they're putting in to the challenges. The behavioral challenges and other things at the middle school, and so that might be one we want to rework, you know what I mean? But for the moment, I didn't add that back in. And this is one of those things, right? I did leave in the assistant to the athletic director. It's roughly about the same cost. There's been a lot of conversation around that over the years. I won't repeat all of that now, so it seems like this was the right time to do it, but if we feel differently and like a student management assistant would have more impact, then we should change that, if you will. The special ed department leader position, it's short money. I don't think that, that's kind of a rounding area. If people felt strongly, we could bring that back in. But I was just trying to keep it clean. And then the next one was the full-time permanent sub up at the high school. And I put a lot of thought into that. And my concern is that we're going to see more absences with the current health situation, and I don't know how you stem that. It's a tough one. I don't know what the right answer is there, but I would worry about that.
About not having the substitute? Yeah, I would too. And honestly, if we're just multiplying out how much it would cost for a daily rate, it's 180 days times 90. I guess I just kind of estimated what the cost was per day, and that's $16,200 we'd already have to pay.
Yeah.
So I just feel like for the difference, to know that we have somebody here that's for the whole school year, and I feel like it's short money for that. That's just my opinion.
That one, I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah.
I don't know what everyone else thinks felt essential to me, but so I put that in. And then everything else, oh God, sorry about that. Don't people know when I'm at school?
It's your mother.
Oh, it's mom. Sorry, Mom.
And she doesn't care whether you're at school committee. She's just calling you.
So that was it. It was kind of short and sweet, and therein was the dilemma that if we were to go for the whole full-day kindergarten thing, and mood check is in here, I believe. Is there? If you scroll, can you scroll?
Oh, it's below that?
Did I miss that? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you're on the screen.
Here we go.
Forgive me. Mood check is in there. I don't think we need to talk more about that. Oh, sorry. Human Resources Director. Yeah, I did leave that in. And
Oh, yes.
but after last week's conversation and Dr. Jackson's presentation, I went back to the chart, pulled out the HR manager cost, because that seemed like a reasonable compromise, and again, a very prudent thing to get in place sooner rather than later. And now that I'm hearing about the searches, that feels like an even more appropriate position to have on our roster. So those are the things that are here. And I guess in my heart of hearts, I just didn't feel right about sacrificing some of these positions to try to get all of full-day kindergarten in at once. I'm not sure. I don't even think it's possible for the town to do that, short of an overrides, but I think this might be possible. And that's worth going to bat for, in my humble opinion.
So I really appreciate this. I think that this is super helpful because I woke up this morning and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to vote on that budget tonight. Okay? We've had a lot of conversations about debt models and future and et cetera, et cetera. So I have been contemplating this literally all day. So this is a great conversation starter and I appreciate it. The issue with tuition-free full-day K for me is I feel like we keep just kicking it down the road. I like this option because my suggestion was actually going to be one of them. If we don't put tuition-free full-day K on the budget this year, I can live with that. I really want to make a concerted effort next year to find a solution for that budget item. Regardless of what it is, like, we need to figure it out, and I think we need to figure it out with the FinCom and the Select Board as part of our whole vision thing, because when you say you think it's only gonna get through as an override.
As a big lump sum.
No, I agree that. I hear you. I'm not sure that would go through.
I don't think it would either, and that's a problem.
So we need to figure this out. I'm not sure we have enough time to figure it out this year per se, because Joan's like, hey, you're kicking it down like the road another year, and I get that.
I got my speech ready.
I don't know you do.
I really do think, let me say differently. If we go to bat for a 3-year plan, we're going to bat for a 3-year plan, not pick off a bit of it this year and hope for the best. I think this comes with as much of a commitment as you can possibly get from the current boards and community to get this paid for in 3 years. And that's not horrendous. That's reasonable. And it's doable. That's the bigger thing.
Yeah.
I know this can be funded by the town. So, whether we get all of that is another, or some combination thereof, but I think the percentages and numbers in there are in the zone, if you will, of what you can respectfully go to a table with and say, this is what we want to negotiate.
Andy, you piped up. I want to hear your
I was
thoughts.
just going to say, a lot of towns have looked at the expense of full-day K, and the lump sum is just not doing it all at once is not an option. Have stepped it down over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. 4 years, 5 years with a bigger sum. Ours actually, to be honest with you, isn't massive. So 3 years seems really reasonable and doable. And I think you're right. The longer we put this off, the more.
We did a trash fee in 5 years, right?
It just becomes such a. I mean, it's been a problem that we've been concerned about since before I was here.
Oh, yeah.
I know other people have been looking at this for a very long time. I think this is a good opportunity for us to take a crack at this.
Dawn?
I like the opportunity to divide it up over a number of years. One of my questions is going to be, why did we pick 3 years as opposed to 4 years or 5 years? But before I get to that, I want to ask, I understand that you, and I think Ann Louise could speak to this too, you went to the State House and you talked to them about are they exploring tuition-free pre-K in Massachusetts? Is there possibly money for that is there any way to have a state match on this or a contribution if we did this as a 3-year plan or a 4-year plan? Is there any other way to go about funding this?
The way I'll come back to your 3 versus 5 year in a second. The way they state one of the strategic priorities for the Student Opportunity Act, they looked, how many of them were there? Like
16.
16. Yeah. The very first one, and they were prioritized, was around early childhood education. The voiceover on that focused on pre-K, and I think the reason it focused on pre-K is because the vast majority of communities have already taken care of the kindergarten problem. That isn't to say that they can't or won't consider kindergarten. When we asked them point blank, they did say there's room and potential for that. But it doesn't come, that's, how do I describe it? I think
We're not there yet.
I wasn't overly
It's not
optimistic, let's put it that way.
I think it won't be without a lot of effort and talking and pushing and advocating and all of that. And that isn't to say that isn't worth doing, but it's not going to be a short term. I suspect that would take a couple of years. Am I wrong? I don't know. What do you think? And I'm hopeful. I'm like, oh, so hopeful. Maybe that year 3 would get picked up a little. I don't know.
So state aid is determined, is a function of of two major things: how many students you have, and the estimated cost that the state puts to educate those students. That information has been updated, how much it costs. That's part of the adjustments that was made to, to bring the cost of health insurance more in line with this is going to be, I'm trying not to make this a long answer, but it really is a very complicated issue, to bring those costs in alignment with where they currently are. So basically what they do is they take the current number of students you have and multiply it times the number of kids you have in each category. So I have so many kindergartners, I have so many 1st through 5th graders, I have so many students with ELL, there's all sorts of adders and everything. They add all that up, and that's how much theoretically, and I'm really going to oversimplify this, but that's how much you should be spending on education. Then they take a whole bunch of other factors, community-based factors, to figure out how much you can afford to spend on education, based on income levels and all sorts of demographics and your real estate and how much industrial property, all that stuff. And they take those two figures, X, how much it's going to cost and how much you can afford. And Chapter 70 is supposed to fund the difference. So right now, we get tuition for full-day kindergarten. So we are only allowed to take credit for half a student, because that's all the taxpayers are spending. So when we're finally done with tuition-free full-day kindergarten, we can then claim
With tuition-based.
for tuition-based kindergarten. Thank you. We can then will essentially, in the state's eyes, double the number of kindergarten students we have, which will cause them to recalculate how much we're supposed to spend on education.
Okay.
And it won't impact how much we can afford to spend on education. So that difference may yield more than $30 a student in Chapter 70.
Okay.
That's about as simple as I can make it, and we won't know that until at least we won't know. We've run those numbers this year, and it gets us closer. And as they continue to refine the formula about how much you should be spending, because there's all sorts of things about students who are from low-income students they're really messing with that adder, because that's been like one of the big issues, and that's actually the only unknown thing in the current Chapter 70 this year's budget, is that the governor, it was supposed to be 14% of they were supposed to implement a new formula in 7 years, so it was supposed to be 14% a year, but the governor only funded 4% of it, so they're trying to fix that. But, so those two issues together may eventually yield a point where we're going to get to the point where we deserve more than $30 a student. We don't know that yet. I know that's completely not helpful, because it's not a definitive
just explain
answer.
Chapter 70. That's good.
So, your other question was around if you look at
Televisions are shutting off
Why
across
3
all
years?
of them.
Why not 4 years, and then be able to tackle some of these issues?
Well, so just a minor history. Last year when we went through this exercise, Dr. Jackson came to us with a proposal that I think actually did, can't remember if it started with 3 years, but it opened up Pandora's box, because then we said, if we're going to look at this, we're going to look at all the fees, right? And when you started to layer them on, it was a lot. And so what we did is come up with a schedule of prorated fees over a 5-year period. And so they actually weren't, it wasn't each one that we layered over 5 years, but we found a way to sort of amortize the cost of the fees depending on which one we were going to deal with first, and which one end first, and how long. In that schedule, if I recall correctly, we did amortize kindergarten over 4 years. Amortize isn't exactly the right word here, but you know what I mean. So the reason we looked at 3 years is probably twofold. One was a question of burden that we thought we could take on all at once with an eye toward getting this done as quickly as possible. And 200,000 was sort of that round number there. There's nothing precise around that, but we felt that if we allocated 200,000 of whatever monies we might be able to get this year, that would still leave some room for a few other opportunities. Now, again, this is more art than science, but the other issue is visibility and confidence. The farther out you go, the less confidence you're going to be able to have that the town can really hold on and make that commitment. So I have a lot more comfort in years 2 and 3 than I do years 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So it would feel to me a little more risky to set up a 5-year schedule. But I think really comes down to priorities, and that's a discussion everyone can have. So 3 years felt like something that we could afford, that was manageable, that I think is negotiable, and we'll get it done in sooner rather than later, you know. But if everyone felt passionate around some of the other things that are here and said, no, we don't, we'd rather allocate more of the monies otherwise, then that's certainly an option.
And this would result in a decrease by 1/3 of what we would charge for tuition for next year? Is that how this would work?
Yeah, because you'd reduce everyone's tuition
1/3.
equally, so it's coming down 1/3. The next year would come down 1/3 again, and then it would disappear
Right.
after the 3rd year.
Joan?
So.
Yes?
3475 to 2316.
Thank you.
That feels better, right?
Keith, could you confirm that?
I'm sorry.
34.
I just got
65.
this
If we cut our-
electronically, so I'm trying to absorb.
Okay.
We cut our tuition by a third.
Do you want me to go to someone else?
Yes, please.
Okay. This side of the table, did you have any?
23, 28, out of order.
I mean,
Go.
I don't know.
Well, it's an
I'm just
unorthodox
seeing it,
process.
I'm
We've
just
never
seeing
done
it
this
too,
before.
No, did you have
so-
any, before you saw all of this, were
Before
you coming
this?
tonight with any questions or your own?
No, other than I thought it was a pretty big number that it was going to be hard. I knew we were going to have to, whittle that down.
Haircut.
Yeah, I knew we were going to have to trim it.
I mean, if there's things you want to play with, we can put a different.
Well, like I said, I feel like with, the substitute issue continuing, and I just felt like if it's going to cost us just to have somebody in a daily at 16.5, how much is it? We're talking 22.5 to have somebody that we know will be there for the year. I just feel like it doesn't make sense to not
Yeah.
put that in. That was the only one I really,
So that's in.
oh, you left that one in, okay, yeah. So other
Yeah,
than
that
that, it's
was
just
it.
hard for me to say over Dawn's.
want me
No,
to
sorry, Dawn's.
Do you want me to go?
awkward.
Do you want me to go back through what's in?
No, I can see it. I can see it, sort of, yeah.
So there's the tutors, the AD assistant, the
Yeah.
substitute, and the out of district. No, the mood check.
Mood check. And no out of district.
Right.
Yeah. I'm concerned about that also in light of the fact that Meg is leaving as well. That's a chunk of her job.
Well, hopefully we sort that out.
Uh-huh.
So in terms of Adams Middle School, none of those initiatives would be met this year. Is that correct? That
Well,
would
I mean-
We only recommended one.
Yeah,
Right.
the prime, no, well, there were two. There was the special ed curriculum specialist, so,
but
yeah, so.
we didn't support that.
But, I mean, if we feel strongly that the
Yeah.
student management assistant is, or the special ed curriculum specialist is more important than some of these other things, then by all means, that's a
But
little
the, I'm sorry, the committee didn't, the budget subcommittee didn't recommend the funding of anything at Rams except
Well,
the
we-
student management assistant.
Right.
Yeah, we did recommend that, yes.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Like, this
So
is,
it's-
let's be
yeah.
clear, it's Sophie's choice, so if we want to say that's more important, we
Well,
probably should cut something else.
Well, the budget, I feel like the budget subcommittee did a deep dive on all of this, and this was their recommendation. So, if we want to reopen that, then that's a different discussion, but.
Yeah, and again, I'm not attempting to trump that. We didn't
Yeah.
re-meet because
No, I know.
it wasn't, it didn't seem like,
Teamwork.
the point was to have the discussion here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you can try it. I mean, the simple math is to put that position in and not the athletic director's assistant. They're roughly the same cost. So like that's one obvious potential trade-off, but it's not one I would. I'm not sure it's one I would have recommended.
Well, think
after
about the
all
strategic
this.
plan. Does the administrative assistant to the athletic director improve student outcomes? Is that an investment in classroom? And I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but.
I
But I have to do that.
I don't
Argue that it does if
Outcomes
you call.
isn't just about the classroom.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing I struggle with.
If we are going to say that it's co-curricular activity, then I would argue that yes, it can affect student outcomes.
But
I
it's
won't
not,
go
it's
into all the
not,
reasons,
yes, but let's be clear, it's not classroom spending.
No.
No, it's not.
But I believe in the, I get it, I'm just kicking the tires on
no, I-
both sides.
And I wasn't trying to overturn what the subcommittee had looked at. It was more to the point of, it's my understanding that the subcommittee had included the student management assistant at Rams.
Well, here, here's what it is, Dawn. So this column J,
Is the sub-
which
That's what,
is where,
that's what we,
and it
right.
It almost, position for position was exactly what Dr. Jackson had recommended, and we threw in another 200,000 with the full-day kindergarten. But, I think after, hearing the committee's feedback last week and also contemplating a little bit more thoroughly where we are as a town, some of the costs that we're looking at, and getting a better understanding for where the other budgets in town are coming in. They're almost all coming in close to 1%. So, there's a standard of reasonableness, right? Like, what are we going to go to the table with and talk to the finance committee about and go to town meeting with, okay? So, and if you look historically we've been fortunate enough to have the town appropriate above guideline to the schools because it's sort of the nature of the beast, right? Significantly above guideline. And I would hope and anticipate that would happen this year again too, but not to the tune of 4.78 or 5%. Like that's just beyond the pale and probably not going to happen, so I want to be realistic. So typically at this point, the committee kind of sharpens its pencil and will look at things and say, well, how do we want to tighten things up?
Right.
So
I was just
this is
wondering.
where we were, and it's just a question of which ones, so.
Where does that put us in percent? I can't see the final percentages.
Yeah, so,
What's the, we were-
so what happens here is separate from run rate.
Sorry,
We
Dawn.
would be adding 413,739 in expense.
right,
That represents a 1.18% increase over last year's town-approved budget, in addition to the 2.72%. in run rate.
2.7.
We have 2.72%
That's for run rate. Yeah.
fixed cost run rate,
Right.
right? So when you add the 1.18, the net increase is 3.9% here, which is a little more palatable than the
Right.
4.7.
And last year we got 3.61. Does that sound right to you?
Pull it up.
So I might be overthinking this, which I think I am.
Can't overthink it more than what I've been.
What if, though, what if we do go with the budget subcommittee recommendation and start the dialogue about, we're serious about tuition-free full-day K. We've got to have a conversation about this. And this is why we needed that planning meeting 6 months ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to have the conversation. We're serious about it. And maybe tuition-free full-day K doesn't hit the FY21 budget, but the conversation started and we make a commitment. Because my other concern is, Anne Louise, you had said earlier, you think the town can handle the third, right?
That's my gut.
Right.
But
No, but-
affordability is subjective.
Yep.
It doesn't mean the town doesn't have other priorities, but I believe we're room for that.
So we
So
have
that's
to
a-
have
that's
that
a discussion.
conversation.
Right, that's a discussion.
Can I ask a question? When we first talked to finance, maybe it wasn't the first time we talked to finance committee, but we were talking about how many kids we actually were who were going half day and what that impacts were, and they were asking us for some data around how many students are only coming half day, and or ones that weren't coming because of affordability, and what that financial impact was. Am I remembering this correctly? And they wanted us to kind of keep track of that. I don't know if we provided them any more detail on that for the last year or so.
I think they asked about it last year. They've asked about it this year.
Okay.
I think it's come up year after year.
Yeah.
And I think we've handled that. The numbers are so broadly in favor of students choosing to come full day.
Right.
That it's sort of a non-conversation because there's only a handful that make the other choice, and we have to respect the confidentiality of why they make that other choice. So we haven't handed that data over per se, but I think they understand the economics of that.
I mean, not that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have full day.
Yeah.
Free full day.
And
we should, because especially in the light of what we're talking about now, looking at pre-K.
Well, that's
And it's
my
just
concern.
like, we're not
is
even
that-
we haven't even hit the first hurdle.
Yeah.
And the state is asking us to start looking at another one.
Right.
And I'm concerned that what if this ends up getting mandated? And then we've got a double whammy
Well, then
that we
that's
can't
gonna-
really control for.
No, but that's going
right?
to be, if that happens, that'll be
I guess,
on,
but does
on
that,
the town to
that's
say,
not really how
what are
we want to,
how are we going to handle that? But
it's not really
I,
planning though.
I guess I would go on a limb and say that, as far as I can tell, most of the members of the finance committee, if not all, and even the select board are supportive of the concept of tuition-free full-day kindergarten. What, as is always the case, how we get there is where, the devil's in the details there. I don't think anyone's suggesting that it's not the right thing to do at this point. And that's progress, because, by the way,
Yeah, that's
that wasn't true 5 years
always
ago.
true.
Right.
So,
Dawn?
What are we putting off under finance and operations? The maintenance and custodial request, the $55,163 and the $30,909. What are we putting off
Yeah,
by
that
not
was-
including that?
that was a painful sacrifice. I don't feel good about it, if you really want the truth. Every year, Keith makes a valiant request for this. It's needed, and it's appropriate, but
And we don't give it to them, and then we complain.
I know, and that's
And
something
it's
I'd like to
struggle.
address
yeah.
because it's been going on for a number of years.
Yeah.
So is there a way, if we looked at tuition-free full-day kindergarten over a 4-year plan, so then next year, instead of paying $3,465, you'd pay $2,607. It would be a difference of $300 over a 4-year plan instead of a 3-year plan, and that would add in an additional $50,000, and we could address one of those maintenance and custodial issues, because I think that's important. It's ongoing, it's
Well, actually,
longstanding.
It actually would give you a little more, like 75 grand, so you
You
might
could use something, tick off.
you
in
might
your
get
box.
both.
I know, it's a good question, I was wondering.
You might
have a
get
plan.
both, but I do want to be clear, like, we can go through these gyrations, that doesn't mean that's what we get.
Right? No, I understand.
So when we make
know.
trade-offs, I think that's important, and it allows us to go to the finance committee and say, we really struggled with this. This is a real priority. And then we can still talk with them about, you know, the amount of funding they have, but if that's what we really want to go after, then, you know, I wouldn't be opposed, because
Yeah.
that hurt my heart when
No,
I was
no,
sitting here
right.
trying to
No,
make
I know.
Sophie's choice, you know.
Brad wanted to offer a comment.
So, just in terms of a possible lens for you to look through this, there are no perfect answers to this. No one is going to walk away from this process happy. I think in general, respectfully, I think this part of the conversation may be a little premature, because we haven't even had a conversation with the finance committee about affordability. So
Right.
we're kind of shooting at a target that we don't understand where it is. I'm not aware of any conversations anyhow. So that's a general comment. More specifically, if you took the phone calls and the emails that I receive that are characterized as complaints, you can put them in 3 categories: athletics, building cleanliness, building and ground cleanliness and upkeep, and personnel mistakes. Now, you guys see those first 2 all the time. That's what clutters your inbox. That's what you're hearing out in the community. If you're communicating to me what you're hearing out in the community, that's what you're hearing out in the community. So I do respect the challenge that you have to make decisions. I'm trying to disinfect classrooms now. Now, I don't want to play that. I'm not trying to play that card, because it's an extraordinary circumstance that isn't always happening, but we're struggling with resources to do something that, you know, we have to make some very difficult decisions about capacity, because you have no idea how much sleep I'm losing over how many classrooms we should disinfect every night. I mean, this is not what I get paid to do, but that's what I'm doing now. And I'm sorry, I'm frustrated, I'm very tired, but these are not decisions I want to be making. And so I'm asking you to look at this through that lens as well. I think we have to look at this through an affordability lens. I respect that, I understand that. I know that if you voted the budget subcommittee budget, that we will be back here. I know that, I'm certain of it, I'm sure of it. I guess that anyhow, but we may be back here anyhow. And
We always are.
so so my 2 points are: consider looking at the lens of problem solving. What are you hearing from your constituency? Not classroom, related, and athletics and cleanliness. That's all you're here. I mean, and in my case, the third thing I hear is, slow response to requests for tuition reimbursement, and, not providing good service, timely, accurate service to our employees.
Internal
in
operations.
executing the collective bargaining agreements.
Well,
Those are all challenges that I'm facing, and I'd ask you to consider those. At the same time, I get this.
Okay,
I might make these same decisions, but.
so what if we put it at 4-year?
if
Do
we,
a 4-year plan, and what does that
we
give
can do
us?
that. Just here, throw a number in.
Yeah,
Go up to the 200. here, this one, and just change that over, well, it's the 625 over 4, obviously. And then go down to the bottom, and let's give you a custodian, whatever, or just say equals, yeah, that.
Is it the maintenance or the custodian you want?
156,
Okay.
250.
Or, I don't know, is it the maintenance or is custodian? that we-
Custodial's been more of a problem.
So, I mean, you can see what that just did. So if you go back up real quick, it dropped the FDK cost down to 156,250
Okay.
Which is a 4-year plan.
Yep.
and for a 4-year plan, and put in the 30,900 from there, and that brings it to 392.
Which
For an
actually
incremental
is small,
1.1.
which is actually a smaller number.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it
actually
is
small.
If Lisa Koshin were here, she would be standing on the table about line 34.
Director of Social and Emotional Learning and Wellness.
Yes, she would be standing on the table about it. And I think in deference to her, and we're still at this juncture this always happens. We approve a budget, we go to the FinCom, we have our negotiations, we come back and revote a budget. I think in deference to her and her years of work on the wellness
I'm not opposed to
committee,
that.
I think we would be, well, first of all, I'm not voting for any of it because I'm going to talk about tuition-free full decay. But if she were here, she'd be on the table about it, and I think it's
Lisa's not an on-the-table type, but I understand.
Yeah.
well, she
I
yeah.
understand your point. She would.
Well, she's on the budget subcommittee,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah.
But
She-
she did not discuss this cut. This is Ann Louise's
No,
swag.
no, they discussed it.
No,
No,
this
no.
swag is
Oh.
Ann Louise's.
Wait.
Okay, I beg
Not the
your
budget
pardon.
subcommittee.
Wait, I want to be really clear because I feel like you're misrepresenting. I brought a tool to the table tonight, and I wanted to allow everyone to kind of look at a scenario where we could play with putting things in and out. So I wasn't making a specific.
And you made that
recommendation.
very clear. I
So-
wasn't trying to say, this is
Okay.
Ann Louise's pushing it on us, but I want to
Yeah.
be very clear that Lisa didn't see this swag.
She didn't see this swag or scenario, and I actually thought she was here until a few minutes ago, but that is why I made this list of the 5 things that people cared most about, but when I put them all in, the math just doesn't
Yeah.
play. But, I mean, sure, let's put that back in. Put the,
I would choose a district
you'd have to
coordinator
put
over that,
90
but
in.
okay.
Well, you could put the 45 and the 45. And-
So,
But we need to cut something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, we can
Is
do
it?
this, and that's fine,
Well,
but
that's good to know, thank you, Dave.
Right, that's why
4.1
Emily
we
said,
won't be back.
sorry,
Oh, I'm sorry, with 4.1, we'll definitely be back. This is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we'll be back at 3.87, but whatever. I mean, in fairness to Lisa, I'm totally with you on that. So, I mean, I think this is as close as we will get to any kind of a number that is rational at this point.
So did you just take both of those positions, the out of district coordinator and the wellness?
Yeah,
Or just
'cause
one?
No. See, the reason these were highlighted is because.
I know they're a joint position, but let's just say we did one and did a halftime instead.
Yeah, so they would be combined into a single $90,000 position.
Right.
And
Okay.
another, and what that does, this is a little misleading because I don't think it's triggering a.
It is, I know, yeah, it should be only
It's
one.
really only a half FTE, right, Keith?
Correct.
Which is
That's
benefits
why that
eligible.
column, which
Yeah,
says yes
so
and no,
it's-
whether it's a benefit elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
it was kind of, it said that, but because we're pricing it at 45, it kind of should be 0.5 to 0.5.
What if it's too bad?
okay, Joan.
If we removed the assistant to the AD, does that get us under 4?
No.
It gets us to 4.
I think that's
Is
an
there
A1
harm in
priority
going
for
in-
most of us.
Because this is our initial request.
I know, we might as well just go in with
Is
what
there
we've
harm
got.
for 4.14 versus 4?
There's no harm. I mean, let's be clear, we can go in with the original recommendation. I think it will you know, like when we get down to brass tacks, it won't survive. And so the real question was, and we've all been around the racetrack here a number of times, right? Like this isn't news to us on how this works. And the real question is, what do we want our main message to be? What do we really want to fight for? Because I can guarantee that won't survive. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't start with that. We can absolutely do that.
Joan?
I am going to, again, advocate for the run rate plus tuition-free full-day K in 1 year, and here's why. Stacy just said, you know, it's time to put a stake in the ground, it's time to get serious. The tuition-free full-day kindergarten task force report was issued on January 22nd, 2015. I think that's when we got serious about tuition-free full-day K. I think that putting a tiered process in place for only tuition-free kindergarten and not the exorbitant expenses of fees at the high school is inequitable. I think that if we go to our friends at the FinCom and say, we're so serious about this, that we're looking for run rate in this, that sends a loud message. We have tried this before, a tiered, it did not go well.
We also tried
that $200,000, that 208.5 is too easy to skip over. It's too easy to say, well, if we take that out, I can hear their voices. And I'm not saying I would blame them, but we've been here before. This is not our first rodeo. We know how this is going to go. I don't think, nothing on this list screams to me the way that the Director of Technology and Digital Learning did. Nothing on here screams to me the way another school psychologist did. All of this will make the district better, but until we have tuition, until we get off this list, we're a scarlet letter district, in my view. We are not, it's inequitable. I think when the state comes down and they do their pre-K and they're gonna, you know, because it will be very politically popular, I don't think they're going to give us any. I think they're just going to mandate it.
No, they might not.
Yeah, So I think that's a gamble. It's not a gamble I'm willing to take. I think that they're just going to mandate it, and then we will be stuck with choosing in that year. This is a year of fiscal health for the town. This is a year that if we went there and said, yeah, this is a big number. It's 4.5%. Run rate plus this would equal 4.5% increase. And then, dear friends, we could stop talking about it because we've been talking about it more than the 5 years. Linda Ween was talking about it 15 years ago. So I think this is the year to put a stake in the ground. And if anyone feels like, yes, all of those things are important, could we fund Mood Check or the administrative assistant or something else that people feel very passionately about out of favorability? Perhaps. I don't know. We're fiscally very healthy this year. We have a number of out-of-district placements that are going away. Aging out, not going away. They're aging out of the system. This is the year to do it, my friends. And that's how I'm going to vote.
I don't disagree with you. There are things on that list that I think are.
I think we can give up in the name of tuition people again.
I'm not
We've done it
sure.
before. There was one, before I came on the committee, that was the only request from the school committee.
This is a year
No,
of fiscal health.
I'm just
Of
saying
the
that it was
town.
done before and we were told no.
I do not feel good about giving up on 3 or 4 of those items up there. And I don't disagree that on some of them, the district will be fine, we can keep going. But I don't think we have enough favorability to pay for some of the other things. And I also, you know, I mean, here's some of the other things I know we're going to hear. So the town submitted their re-rating request to Stanton Poor's, right? And it came back not AAA plus, but just under, right? And they have to squirrel away now another few $1 million to hit the bond rating that they want. I guarantee there's going to be some plan for that, right? And when you're sitting there looking at a debt schedule for hundreds of millions of dollars, you know what? That's a smart thing to do. I couldn't argue with that. If I really put my town hat on, I'd have to say, you know what? The best bond rating you can get is what you need when you're going to take on a school project. So I know that's going to be in there. I have a sense, you know, what I'm hearing right now is there's a few $100,000 in play, not hundreds of thousands of dollars, that might be available for the schools after. So it's not going to be 4.78%. I think that is utterly unrealistic.
Then let them be the one to say no.
Then let's go to them with the whole thing, but I'm not comfortable trading off some of these things personally with full-day kindergarten in one fell swoop.
They could come back to us and say, no way. And then we can say, okay, well.
But I think, no, I think this year the response is going to be, okay, not now, but when? We need to talk about
And unless we put a stake in the ground, because we said that in 2015.
I know. But
It's 2020. That's what I'm saying. I think all of these are really important, but I'm not going to die over any of them. No offense.
Someone might die if Mooncheck doesn't.
Well, Mooncheck, I think we could fund out of favorability. I do. We have favorability.
But in addition, full-time subs, we know that's an issue. We keep kicking maintenance and custodians. That's an issue. I think that we are putting a stake in the ground by doing this over a 3 or 4 year plan. We're reducing it. We're reducing it down to from 3,465 down to, it would be 2,316 or 2,607 with a plan to continue to reduce it.
But that's 3 years. I totally see the rationale there. Number one, I think it's too easy to skip over for them. It's too big
I
enough.
don't think it is. It's like
When they look at the list and they see that 208, it's too easy for them to go like, okay, what else you got? It's too easy to do that, number one. Number two, we don't, the Chapter 70 we'd be putting that off as opposed to ripping off the Band-Aid. If we went for tuition-free full-day K in 1 year, that's no FTEs, that's no benefits, which would appeal to them because that doesn't hit our line item, it goes to the omnibus budget.
But it's such a large number. They've
It's
told
time
us
to
no
pay it.
before.
Yeah,
And the
it's time
town's
to pay
told
it.
us no before. So if we divide it up, we might get a yes.
Look, we haven't yet, but it does ignore, that 200,000 does ignore the high school parents. So does tuition-free full-day K. But I would like to do tuition-free full-day K and then start working on those fees over time with the high school parents.
By the way, it isn't just the high school, some of those.
No, I know, some of them are middle.
The heavy lifting on the fees starts in middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bulk of it's high school.
So I don't expect that I'm going to gain a lot of traction here, but that's my thinking.
Okay, so I'm not sensing anyone's ready to vote on it's like A or it's B. In which case, it's still some version of B, I guess, because we haven't, I mean, am I wrong?
When do we need to vote on it by?
Tonight,
Oh.
because the
We need to vote on
17th.
Present before
something
next
tonight.
meeting.
Oh,
Present.
right,
Because
okay,
it's a week from Tuesday.
yes.
I would feel better voting for it all. Just personally, I'm not comfortable,
Been parsing it out yet?
yeah. I'd rather ask for it all and
But what do we mean by it all? Because
no, I mean
The budget subcommittee recommendation.
Budget subcommittee. Yes.
Yeah, the
No.
first,
Oh,
that's the first
yeah,
one, Jay.
sorry.
This was the budget subcommittee, but just to be clear, that has a 3-year plan for full-day kindergarten.
No, I understand that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's fine, and then we'll take it to them, we'll review it, and
We'll see what happens.
Well, that was just my.
Yeah, let's
you
get
guys
feedback
need
from
to,
them,
so-
right?
They'll give us more, and we can do it in 1 year.
Yeah.
Right, I mean,
Wait, so what is there a motion on the table? And I wasn't trying to make the motion,
I'll
actually.
To
moved by Cynthia
wait,
to approve
what?
the original budget from the subcommittee.
226, where, is that the date, Brad?
For 7-0,
The
whatever,
226 budget subcommittee.
recommendation.
$36,598,807. Is that
Which
the right
is-
number, Keith?
Is that the 4.7%?
4.7%.
That's everything.
Yeah, if you
That's-
scroll down just a
That's the
bit.
whole enchilada.
Actually, if you click on, I don't think I put it all down there.
So,
It does, I
But
don't,
if you
it
click
doesn't
on-
feed that
Which
on.
one?
give one person for that, a
Summary?
coordinator and the wellness, but whichever one is most important.
Is this where you want to start?
No, you have a different number here.
That's,
If you go up.
So let me just change the number.
You're in superintendent. Click on
example,
summary.
Like
and
myself,
you-
not, I would work for the district, that would be something I would do.
Right under-
36,598,807.
It's one of these two.
I got it.
Summaries happen.
I know.
Before we vote on this, does this include the custodian?
so can I just
Yeah, I
try to
think so.
summarize? So
Yeah.
36,598,807 is the budget subcommittee's recommended appropriation. That includes all of the superintendent's recommendations, plus $208,500
Plus
for
a
1/3, for a 33% reduction in the tuition fees for full-day kindergarten.
Moved by Cynthia.
Seconded by Andy.
All in favor? So that's 5, in favor, opposed, and 1 absent. Okay, thank you.
Can I, I know you want to go home, but we need to.
Oh, we have to do a newsletter.
We need to put our stake in the ground around capital.
Okay,
We need to report to the FinCom on our capital.
Okay.
So the budget subcommittee also recommended, is that also on that?
We also
There it is.
recommended a cool million in capital.
All of the recommendations for capital were also recommended. So that would be $125,000 for Miller roof repairs, $500,000 for the comedian field turf, $244,820 for device upgrades for instructional and administrative staff, $126,478 for Chromebooks for kindergarten, 6th, and 9th graders, and $21,788 for network infrastructure, for a total capital recommendation by the Budget Subcommittee, $1,018,086.
Moved by Cynthia. No?
Joking to me? Seconded by
Somebody second
Seconded
it?
by Ann Louise. Sorry.
Is there any discussion or questions over that? All in favor? That's all of us.
That was unanimous?
Yes. Well, one abstain. I mean, one abstain.
One absent.
Yes.
Thank you for indulging me with that second
Just
motion.
Okay. While Joan is doing a real-time newsletter, let's go to warrants and bills.
We have a school bill warrant in the amount of $397,809.16.
Moved by Andy.
Seconded by Cynthia?
Moved by Andy, seconded by Cynthia. All in favor? That's all of us.
And thank you, and we have a student activity replenishment warrant for the high school, $15,848.57.
Moved by Andy.
Seconded by Cynthia?
Anthony, seconded by Cynthia. All in favor? Okay, great. That's all of us.
That's all.
Okay, so while Joan's still writing and sending to everyone, the minutes of the policy subcommittee meeting from January 28th are in the packet for
They're riveting.
review.
Read them.
They are riveting. So our next meeting date is March 17th, which is a Tuesday. It's the budget presentation to the Finance Committee. Their meeting begins at 7 p.m. in Town Hall. I actually will not be able to be there.
The course, like, there's a performance.
It's not, are you posting? Because it's not a committee meeting, it's just our,
Oh, it's you.
Right.
Okay.
yeah. I mean, everybody,
Ray and I would love to
Yes.
see you
Anyone
there.
can
It's not a
come.
deliberation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone
Okay,
can come,
okay.
but-
I'm just sharing with you, I won't be there, just.
I don't
It's the
think
only
I'll
day
be
of
able to be there.
obligation for me, so I don't think I'll be there.
Then Thursday, March 19th is our regular session meeting.
St.
Are
Patrick's
there
Day.
any,
March 17th, you're half Irish.
when is our next policy? Can I
I've
just
been
ask
hearing
about
very-
Oh,
subcommittee
yeah.
meetings?
Next policy meeting is on
March
30th, Monday, March 30th at 8:30 in central office.
Does budget subcommittee have any meetings scheduled so far?
Well, we're going to try and set up a liaison meeting next week, but there was a question around the FinCom schedule, so I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, no, that's fine. Is there any other meetings scheduled before our next meeting on the 19th? Any subcommittees that we need to include in the newsletter? Okay. So for the audience, we are not adjourning just yet. We will be reviewing our newsletter, which is painful to watch. It's
Painful to participate in.
turning off and enjoying the rest of your evening. But for those who want to listen, it will be a couple of
Watch
minutes.
us
So-
wordsmith the
Thank you.
document.
While we wait, I
While
just
you
wanted
can't see.
just to give you a preview for the March 19th meeting. We'll leave some time aside for a budget discussion if necessary following the March 17th meeting with the FinCom. Keith will present the March financial statement. There'll be a school start times update if there's one there. Student Opportunity Act decision of the use of that funds, that will be on the agenda. The school committee is going to be asked to approve the revised tech agreement at that meeting, which, assuming the Board of Directors of Tech approves on a week from Friday. Yeah, a week from Friday, to add Midway as a member of Tech. Peter's going to give you a preview of our PD Day, which is taking place the next day on March 20th. And that's pretty much it. I also wanted to mention that there was something else I wanted to mention about meetings. I've been invited to present with Chief Cassidy and the Health Director to the Select Board on Wednesday around the town-wide response to Corona. And school committee members are welcome to attend that meeting. And we
Next
do.
Wednesday?
That's next Wednesday. On Monday, we have been confirmed as we are on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen for the statement of interest. This coming Select Board, thank you. I'm going to do that for a while.
I know.
Thank you for the question.
What's the date of that?
It's Monday, the
Ninth?
9th.
What time Wednesday was that meeting?
7?
Well, it's sometime during the
7:30?
Select Board meeting. I think they put us on at 7:30.
Wait.
Do you remember?
No, Select Board meeting Monday. You said that,
But they're having another meeting on Wednesday.
They're having a meeting on Monday. The regular meeting is Monday. We've been invited to present my request to receive Select Board permission to submit a statement of interest. for the
That's
high school.
Monday.
That's Monday.
But-
On Wednesday, I'm just as an item of information, I've been invited along with Chief Cassidy and Health Agent Scott Moles to present, and I think the Senior Center Director may be there as well, to present about a townwide response to Corona.
I have a couple of books on pandemics.
you don't know what time that is at?
That is
We were invited there at 7:30
Or maybe Chief wants.
on Wednesday.
7. I don't know if I'll be there because it's the senior showcase. Last senior.
They just confirmed the meeting today.
Yeah,
My wife was
okay,
very-
understood.
you can catch up on HCAP.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give you that information while Joan writes furiously.
No,
I don't hear a
I
lot of clicking
anticipated
over
that.
there.
I know,
I
start
didn't
clicking, lady.
expect to garner a lot of traction in my impassioned speech.
Oh, so you just shared something.
So I did write up what I thought, how I thought this was going to go. So,
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Okay, I'm not laughing at you.
I'm pragmatic.
I know you are.
Wait. Wait.
I do adore your passion. Wasn't the right way. I'm sorry, I wasn't meant to be condescending at all. It's just, let me see if this will go in right. Come on. Oh. Stupid. No. Sorry. Any issues trying to put something in. Go back. I think I'm going back.
John, I assume if it says here, it's going to be a link to,
Yes, does this budget verbiage sound at all familiar, Mr. Morton?
I think this is anticipated. I think it was. Oh, what did I do? Escape.
It's because too many of us are trying to.
Cynthia,
Yeah, sorry.
can you scroll down to the very bottom
Yeah.
and tell me, oh, sorry, Dawn. Can you scroll down to the bottom and tell me about that last thing? Should we take that out in light of the earlier discussion?
Well,
Or keep it in?
no, we can leave it in. I thought I was going to be mentioning it, but apparently.
If it's going on Backpack Express, I'm just,
If it's going in Backpack Express, I suppose we don't.
To increase by
Brad was concerned about sending it out over
budget.
Power School. Because
But
Power School, you have to opt
Yeah.
into that. I guess you have to opt in, yeah.
The 949 is,
It's over the, it's.
I would like to keep it in because I've been working on it.
Right,
to get
so
it
that's
here,
awkward, like-
So,
Fine with
so
me.
would you
I
call
think
that
this is the write-up from the last one.
anticipated?
Could you take a look at that?
That's
And
no, I just wrote it. I mean, it's like the same thing that they said. I'm trying to just get it in so it hyperlinks properly. It's just not doing it.
You could say fixed cost for the FY21 budget increased 9,000 over their FY21.
And does anyone have strong feelings about inserting this directly into the body of, I don't think it really lends itself, particularly to a mobile view. So I think linking to it is better, so we're going to have to post it somewhere.
oh, how about this?
Nothing to do now.
I don't know. Brad, are you saying you want to take this one out?
Joan?
Yes.
Under
Over the
Holliston
current
Select
year.
Board will on
How
March
about that?
9th, that paragraph,
Just this.
second sentence, you refer to it as the building authority. Up in the paragraph above it, you said Massachusetts School Building Authority, and then italicized MSBA. So would you change building authority to MSBA for consistency, since that's how you named it?
So, the
So under the paragraph that starts, the Holliston Select Board will on March 9th, second line of that, you said participate in the building authority's process. Wouldn't it be the MSBA's
Yeah,
process? You named it.
this is my novelist approach versus my reporter approach. So you try to refer to things in different ways to not be boring. So, but you're right, because this is a newsletter.
Can you correct the spelling of Anne Louise Handstead's name in that?
No, I've been spelling her name incorrectly for years.
Okay.
Why would I
think she's
stop
thinking
now?
of changing it, actually. Just to make,
To
sooner or later, they just.
I thought getting married to a nice Norwegian guy would solve my spelling issues with Schiavone.
Yeah.
No.
Not so much. I have been called handstand.
Handstand.
So it's
I like that.
H-A-N.
Handstead.
STAD.
Yeah.
But you have it as hands,
T.
sad.
I have been doing it since I've met her.
Handsad.
I think I misspelled it on the strategic plan.
No.
It might be just easier to change your name, Anne Louise. She's going to keep at it
I know.
until you prove
Try again.
What? No, I'm just going to start writing Schiavone.
Okay, so people were getting out of control.
So,
So we,
one thing, just
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's lost power.
to consider for the newsletter, Joe, when you're talking about the reimbursement rates, we do, while we don't know what the FY '20, the 2020 reimbursement rate would be, we were told in 2019 that our
Yes.
reimbursement rate was going to be 48.05%.
Mine's not right.
So whether you want to include that or not, it's in the presentation.
Right, I
because
thought about it, but
Underset.
I'm afraid we're going to be, you said 48.
Yep. I mean, it could be 47.95% this year, who knows?
And it could be,
So-
I just didn't want to
I just
muddy the
want to bring it
waters,
up.
yeah.
I think I'm fine with that.
Are
Thank you.
there any content changes? Because if it's just grammatical, we can actually.
And statement of interest, we've already looked at this. We looked at this before. The budget process and priorities tracks very closely to language we've already approved. Thank you, Mr. Morton.
Oh, from last year. That's why.
Yes.
That's why it looks so well written.
Oh, look at that.
beg your
Oh, that's
pardon.
Very nice. Well done, Mr.
Say
Morton.
exclusive all of-
Actually, I think we have received in all the time, I've been involved in the newsletter maybe twice, we've received like, oh, it's clever, it's well-written, blah, blah, blah. One of those times was after Andy wrote that, and you know who it was from? Kate Morton. Who I said, oh, aren't you cute? Andy wrote it, and she had no idea.
Is there a motion to approve the newsletter?
People are still reading. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
wait
the
a
air with
second.
words.
Sheesh. There's a
Brad,
couple
is this
little-
going to be posted somewhere that I might link to it? Or else I need to put it in the body of the report?
I'm not really
What?
Nope, that's wrong.
Hey, and
sharing that, bro.
What's wrong?
You passed it at a school
I
committee
did.
meting, so
I did.
it's public
Town
record.
meeting is
I
not time.
I know that. That means it can be requested and will be provided.
Yeah, it's 4, 5, 4.
I just trying to,
I'm asking to publish this.
you can publish it. I'll put it on the School Start Times news.
Yep.
That's the right place for that.
Yep, and then I'll link to it there.
But
That'd be
it's
great.
going to be.
What's the town meeting meeting's 5, 4?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sending this out tonight. I haven't even met with Dan.
Joan, under key dates, 4/4, public hearing, that's a Saturday. We think that you mean
4-2.
4/2.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Oh,
Brad?
was it wrong on the, I got it off the
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
Can't be. Oh,
Yeah, it was definitely wrong.
Yeah, that's ACT testing
It says
day.
April 4th, 2020, public hearing on the FY21
Well, it
budget.
should say 4/2.
Yeah, I got that off of the thing, and off of the PowerPoint, and I thought it was strange that it was the exact same date as last year.
Well, there you go.
So, forgive me, what is the actual
Little
date?
leap year.
4/2.
4-2.
4/2, thank you.
It's the leap year problem. That's what it is.
Joan,
Yep.
what if we just had a link to the process description and then just put the dates that you put
A
out?
link, but where am I putting that?
Under just like literally the process, just,
But link
or
it to
description.
what?
Well, like, if, I don't know, it's a one-page description or something, whatever, I guess it doesn't matter. It's well written.
Yeah, people can
It's
skip
just a
it.
lot of detail.
Yeah.
It turns off at 4.5. 5 minutes, I know.
Should, under the impact study, Joan, under the impact study, shouldn't there be like some statement about, causation versus correlation?
Sure, go ahead, put it right in.
I'm having trouble.
What are you having trouble with?
Under impact study,
Yes.
We just said a study.
I
just want to make sure that we're clear about what we were talking about
an
before.
impact study, so I sort of want to keep that verbiage to the extent that,
Well, actually, I had a question to ask about that, Brad. It's not, when you say impact study, are you referring to the survey that you're going to do or this overall analysis? Because
I'm
one
referring
is
to the analysis of the survey result, the 2 survey results.
the before and after survey results, but in this chart, there's lots of other stuff, right?
Well, there's a number of surveys. I'm referring to a comparison of the before data and the after data.
Across,
All of those.
so I was going to
Dates and
raise the
groups
question whether impact study,
Is the right word.
yeah, because it makes it sound very specific, very definitive and official. And I feel like what we're doing is an analysis of the impact, which is maybe a play on words.
so let's not make it a
you're right
proper
about that, I
noun,
think,
let's say
yeah.
a study to assess the impact.
Yeah, let's just take
Yeah,
the,
okay.
let's just say a study, yeah, and then assess the impact. That's good. Because it's not, yeah.
Okay, so, did everyone read through?
Well, we have a grammatically completely nonsensical sentence now. Okay.
Right, but we can approve the newsletter
For content.
for content, which I.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes.
So that's my question.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve the newsletter that will be amended for grammatical reasons only? And I know that was a silly motion. I can't. Sorry.
We approve the newsletter.
Can we approve the newsletter? Is there a motion?
Moved by Cynthia.
Seconded by Anne Louise.
Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Anne Louise. All in favor? Great. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved by Andy.
Seconded by Cynthia.
All in favor? Okay, so moved by Andy, seconded by Cynthia, all of us, yes.
I'm all in.
It is now 9:15. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
I think that